Make sure you check with your local authorities, your Fish and Game, Wildlife, Bureau of Land Management, cops, sheriffs, everybody, to make sure that you're actually allowed in your area to have this much fun. Be sure to hit that subscribe button for more tips and tricks and more videos of mini boating. It's what I do. It's what I'm here for. And that's what you're going to see if you hit that notification bell. Well, hello there. It's me, American Boathead. Welcome to all the ladies, the gentlemen, and the boatheads. Today, I'm going to be sharing with you 5 mistakes that I've come across most commonly in all my mini boating adventures. So let's go. This mistake is building your boat too small. Now there's no length restrictions and it's pretty hard to build a boat too small. Pretty much anything you can fit in will work. But there's a few things that you can focus on making big enough that will make your life a lot easier. And the main one is the cockpit. Now in this boat, you can see how easily I can stand up and sit down in it. That's a big thing. When you're out unloading your mini boat into the water and you're squeezing into it and there's people watching you because they tend to draw a crowd, you're going to want to be able to get in there and zoom off before they start asking you questions. And notice how your boat looks close up. Now this cockpit, with the seat, I have about 28 inches of clearance, and that's plenty for me. The opening is about 30 inches. If you're fatter than me, you might want to go a teeny bit bigger, but this is probably big enough. And there's one other reason that you want your cockpit a little bit bigger. When you're measuring out how big you need yours, put your knees up. Can't see here, because I notice on some of the longer cruises, sitting like this with your legs straight out underneath the top of your boat, your butt starts to hurt, your behind your knees, whatever those are called, leg pits, start to hurt, your lower back, sciatica, starts to hurt, your neck starts to hurt, everything. And just being able put your knees up a little bit and rest your arms on them and still cruise, steer, whatever, makes all the difference. So make sure you make your cockpit big enough. Even if your boat's smaller than this one, make it big enough to get in and out. Practice a few times getting in and out of it. Step up a little bit and get down into your boat as if it were getting off a dock. Stand up on something and try getting in from higher up, as if you're stepping down into a dock, off of a dock. And if you can't get in as smooth as that, you need to make your opening a little bit bigger. The other thing that people often build too small is their floor. Now, technically anything that's wider than your hips is probably good to go, but if you want to be more comfortable as far as stability, left and right, rock and roll, you're going to want to go wider, and I would say just start at 24 inches and you'll be solid. You'll feel great. But if you're bigger, older, slower, any-er that you can think of than me, you might want to go, this one's 32 inches wide on the floor. And that's why in the back I got my shape by making the top narrower. But this boat I can stand up in and rock back and forth, and it's as stable as a stand-up paddleboard. And that goes a long way. You also don't want to build your boat too big. Now, there's a common idea around the mini boating world that anything under 8 feet is a mini boat. And you don't really want to go above 8 feet, because then you have to start putting joints in the top of your beautiful panel. Keep your top piece under 8 feet. Usually their side piece will have enough length to curve around and meet at the front. But the part I'm talking about, you don't want to go too big on the sides. This is 16 inches tall from here to here. A lot of people start out with something 2 feet tall. And that's right here. And if you're sitting on the floor, that's going to be way too tall. So just remember, you're building a small boat. It's only 8 feet long. Your ratio of how tall it is and how wide it is going to be dramatically smaller, gymnastically smaller. This boat, at its widest point, is 33 inches wide. That's plenty wide enough. That's less than a third, or that's like a 3-to-1 ratio of length to width. If I want somebody that's inexperienced with boating to feel more secure when they get in this boat, they're gonna feel very stable, even in some wakes and waves and whatnots. So don't make it too wide, but make it wide enough. So go at least 24, maybe at max out at 36. You don't want to get too wide. And especially if you're getting wider at the top than you are at the bottom, you definitely don't want to start getting out to the 4 feet wide range, or else you're kind of looking like a square. Nobody wants to look like a square. Now this is a really common mistake, especially for smart people. Smart people do this the worst. They think about all the things that could go wrong and they build for the worst case scenario, which would be pretty much driving your boat off of a waterfall in hurricane winds. So they build it with 2x4s on 16 on center, 12 on center, 1/2-inch plywood on the sides and top. And it's basically like driving a battle tank. Now don't worry if this is you, because you got no worries when you're driving a battle tank, right? But it's pretty hateful moving those things around, and they're not as efficient. So you might want to build it a little lighter. I've never heard in all my travels somebody say, I wish I would have built my boat heavier. Not even once. But what I have heard about 3, 4, or 5 times is that I wish I would have built it a little bit lighter, or I sure overbuilt this. So just keep these tips in mind. This is a 1/4-inch plywood, and actually it's a little bit smaller. It's only 5 millimeters, which is just a little bit thinner than a 1/4-inch. And it's plenty strong enough for everything you need, and it's cheap. Where you put a nice curve in the side of this plywood, it becomes really strong and really rigid, and you barely even need any support in here. Now, if you have any flat spots, like towards the cockpit, you definitely want to put some bracing behind it. But look at this, it's really strong. This is 5 millimeters thick. Build it super light, and you'll thank yourself every time you have to move it, every time you load it into the water, every time you load it out of the water, unload it into the water, unload it out of the water, move it around your garage, everything. You're gonna thank yourself for not having it so heavy. But there is 3 exceptions to this rule. You really want something behind this piece. So when you go to pick it up, you don't just rip the handle out and ruin the top of your boat and look like an idiot. I always use a 2x6, which might be a little overkill because I overthink stuff too. And I run it from up here all the way down with a double beveled edge on the front. And all of this is screwed into it. So that when I grab this handle and I pull up on it, it's grabbing the whole sandwich. The floor, the sides, the top, all held on by these screws. Another important place to gain a lot of strength easily is having a nice thick floor. I always start out with a floor as my backbone and then build the rest as light as I possibly can. This is a 1/2-inch piece of plywood, maybe 5/8, I can't remember. If you're a bigger fellow, you can maybe go with 3/4, but even then, you really probably don't need to. It's just gonna be heavier than it needs to be. Go with 1/2-inch so that you don't feel like you're gonna put your foot through the floor when you get in it. Another place that you wanna not skimp on strength is your transom. You want this to be nice and thick because your motor is likely gonna mount to the back of it or clamp around the top of it. You might upgrade to an outboard gas motor someday, and you're gonna wanna cut a hole and clamp it to the back of this. You want this to be nice and strong. And it also creates an extension of the backbone, kind of, the tailbone, if you will, for the rest of the sides and top to mount to keep it nice and strong. So don't overbuild your build, Bill. This next common mistake I see is kind of an order of operations one. You want it stained first, and then your varnish or your epoxy will still soak into the wood and bond with the wood and become part of the wood and waterproof it. Then put your paint on top of that. What you don't want to do is paint it all first and then put epoxy or varnish over that. You can do epoxy, varnish, glue, then paint, and then another layer of shiny stuff. But you want the first layer of something substantial to be epoxy, wood glue, or whatever else you're using. Staining it is different. That just colors it. You're fine. It's still going to bond well. And in fact, you should stain it first if you're going to stain it and go for the wood grain look. Just remember, stain first, then seal it, then paint it. Okay? You don't sleep with your boats? That's weird. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you're a true American Boathead fan, you notice that there's a common theme with pretty much every one of my boats, is that there's a very little leak somewhere. Now a lot of people think, oh, well, I'll just grab one of these guns and I'll find the leak and I'll squirt some of this in there and keep the water out and my buns won't get wet. That might work, but it probably won't work, and it's the wrong way to do it. You want it waterproof from the outside in. If you're having a leak somewhere, you need to find out where it's getting in at, not where it's coming through at, not where you see the puddle forming. That will help, but you want to start with your first defense being the outside. When you join two pieces of wood together, there's going to be a crack all the way between the two. Some places bigger, some places smaller. But what you want to do is make sure that these are all filled in with some kind of Bondo or waterproof Bondo, or even caulk if you really have to. But you probably want something sandable and hard. And then round it off good. If you don't fill these cracks, what will happen is the glue or the resin won't stick to where that air is behind there. And you're going to have a dead spot in your fiberglass, and usually there will actually be pinholes right there. Because there's nothing to stick to it, the gravity will just pull it down away from that joint. Some caulk and squeeze it out on your finger, like that. And then go around any place you think you see a hole and rub it in there. Rub it into those little holes, because in between the weaving of that fiberglass, sometimes there will be a little hole where water can get through. So you just want to squish a little bit of something waterproof in there. Then you can come back and paint it over. You need to find that leak quick, because if you keep going out like that, you're eventually going to start ruining your boat. You worked way too hard on this. Although it would be a good excuse to build another boat, so me. So there you go. 5 mistakes to avoid on your mini boat build. If you follow these tips, you're going to have a lot more enjoyable time building, transporting, storing, and cruising your mini boat. Next time I'm going to tell you some tips and tricks to make your boat better than just good enough. I'm the pro of just good enough. I've learned a few things over the years that are easy and simple to do that will just make your boating experience much more enjoyable. So make sure you hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and hit your dog for all I care, and hit the garage for some build time. Hit the hardware store for some materials. Hit on hot girls. Hit the nail right on the thumb. Hit it and never quit it. Hit the road, Jack. Don't come back. All right. Good luck. Gosh darn it, go build a boat. And also avoid these mistakes.